resources, inspiring interviews, business practices, and practical advice to take your art career to the next level. Join Sergio Gomez in today's Artist Next Level and get ready to take control of your career.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Artist Next Level podcast. I am very happy to be here with you today, especially because I have a great conversation to share with you with artist Jennifer Pazienza. You will love it. It's an awesome conversation you do not want to miss. But before I share that with you, I want to also let you know about a brand new resource that I put together. And maybe if you listened to last episode, I talked about that I was working on something special for you. I was really almost done with it. Well, my friend, it's finally finished. So I wanted to share with you. It's called the Art Sales Toolkit. Again, it's the Art Sales Toolkit. And what it is I put together 2 videos based on 2 decades of experience as an artist, as a curator, as a gallery owner. And what that is 2 videos on how to first find art collectors, figure out where they are, how to get in front of them. That's the first video. And then the second video is on how to sell art online, right? As we have moved to kind of online platforms and selling directly online as well. Everything that I have learned as an artist myself, selling online and making 2019 my best year ever in terms of sales online. And then also with my own gallery, 33 Contemporary, now moving fully into selling art online. So I put together these 2 frameworks. It's totally free. It's called the Art Sales Toolkit. It's the ultimate free masterclass to find art collectors and sell art online. So the way you get it is super easy. All you have to do is go to my website at www.theartistnextlevel.com / and the word sales. So super easy. Again, www.theartistnextlevel.com / sales. Or, just go to my Instagram at Sergio Gomez Art. Message me there. Just put the word sales and I'll send you a direct link to the page. So all you have to do is just click on it and boom, you can get it. Again, it's totally free. It's a video series with just 2 videos you can watch back to back. And, when you register, it automatically takes you right into the page where you can watch the first video and then you can watch the second one. If you don't have time to watch them right away, you get also the link by email. So as you have time, you can go and check out these 2 awesome resources that I'm sure are going to be very useful for your art career. And by the way, I would love to hear how you like them. I would love to hear, what you think about this framework. So again, just go to www.theartistnextlevel.com / sales. And well, my friends, now I want to introduce you to my guest today, who is an awesome artist. She is a member of my Art Next Level Academy, and that's how I met Jennifer. Jennifer Pazienza has an extensive record in academia. She earned a master's and a PhD in art education at the Pennsylvania State University. She is now fully retired from teaching, but she is busier than ever running her own art career. You're going to hear all her energy and enthusiasm in this podcast. Jennifer creates paintings that are visually poetic, contemplative, and invite us to enter a quiet space of contemplation. She's originally from New Jersey, from an Italian-American family. But for the last 25 years, she has resided on New Brunswick, Canada, where she lives with her husband and also their awesome dog. Her extensive exhibition record includes shows in Canada, the US. Her work is held in public, private, and corporate collections in Canada, the United States, and Italy. And I am super excited to have in the show with me today, Jennifer Pazienza. Well, hi, Jennifer. How are you today?
Hi, Sergio. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. And let me ask you this question. Are you ready to take us to the next level today?
We'll see.
I am sure you are. I've known you now for a little bit, and it's just been really a pleasure to get to know you better. And in this conversation, after this conversation, I'll even get to know you more. And the better part is that we will share this with our friends here in the Artist Next Level podcast and share a little bit about the things that you are doing as an artist, social media, your business as an artist, your educational background. Because I think, the art career is one that is always in flux, always changing. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. We always change. And not only sometimes because we wanted to change, but sometimes change that comes in the world that affects all of us. I don't know about you, but like just 10 years ago, social media wasn't really on top of my list. And now it is, right? So the
Sure.
world changes, the platforms change, the way the world communicates change, everything changes. So I think as artists, we need to adapt. We need to move forward. And I think that's something that you have done well. And, from the time I have known you, and you are an artist who are not afraid to try, to test, to learn something new. And even today, right before
Yes.
our podcast, we were talking about some of the things that you're testing. And that is fabulous. I love that energy that you have, Jennifer. But before we talk a little bit about some of those kind of more business aspects of the art career, which I think will be very helpful for our friends, tell us a little bit about you, Jennifer. Where are you based right now, and how you became an artist?
Okay, well, I live on Keswick Ridge in New Brunswick, the province of New Brunswick in Eastern Canada.
Okay.
I'm here 30 years. I'm originally from the States. I'm a Jersey girl.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. The daughter of Italian-American immigrants. For anybody from Jersey listening, exit 148.
Okay.
Yeah, and when people ask me, where I am and how I got here, I tell them I-95. It was a circuitous kind of thing. I came here 30 years ago for my job at UMB, art education professor at UMB.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually in your neck of the woods back then. Well, if you were, when did you come to Chicago? What year?
That was 1988.
Okay, well, we could have walked right past each other.
Really?
Because I was at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee at the time.
Okay.
And I came to Chicago often. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Maybe we have, who knows?
Yeah, but here I am on this gorgeous Keswick Ridge. And, very special.
Fabulous. So tell me a little bit about your educational background. So you went to art school, you finished that up, and, when did you realize that teaching was something that you wanted to do?
Well, interestingly, Sergio, I very much wanted to go to art school, but I'm going to give away my age here. But being the age that I am, and at the time, in a very traditional Italian-American family, I was I was the first person to go to college in my family, but it was frowned upon to become an artist. It was okay to be an art teacher, but it wasn't okay to be an artist. And so I applied to one school. My parents died when I was a kid. I was 8 and 9 years old when they died, and I didn't know how I was going to get to university, but I applied to one school and got in, and as fate would have it, I also won a car that year, and long story, and that made it possible for me literally to drive to school. On a car and a church raffle. And
That's a great story.
I know. I mean, there's more to that, but I don't think you want to hear. It was also waiting tables, but that's more, many years in waiting tables. But what happened was I went to William Patterson University, and I had a minor, because at that time, becoming an art teacher, you had to take every kind of studio possible. And in those days, I was doing a lot of painting and drawing and a lot of photography at the time, just trying to find where I fit and what materials I actually really wanted to work with. But it was always, my degrees were always in the art education field, with one little segue to School of Visual Arts in 1974, because I thought at the time I wanted to be a children's book illustrator, but realized that no, actually I did not want to do that. But it was a lot of fun going over to the city in the summer.
Right. No, that's great, Jennifer. So as you are, building kind of your career as a professor and as an educator, tell me about also, building your career as an artist. Because that's something that, we have to do, right? As
Absolutely.
Building that art career as well. Tell us a little bit about, your work also. What kind of art do you make?
Okay, so I'll start with the first part of your question. Because for me, art education and the making of art were always integrated for me, or at least I always sought for them to be. And I was very lucky. When I went back to graduate school, very naively applied to Penn State in art education, but I went back because I wanted to learn more about how to teach kids. And that is a whole other story. I was teaching 1,000 kids a week in central Pennsylvania, the Art on the Cart lady, and it was driving
my goodness.
But I had no time to make art. And I wanted to jumpstart my art making again. Little did I know that I landed into a faculty of art education with practicing artists. So I was very fortunate that the theoreticians I studied with were actually incredible practicing artists as well.
Wow.
And so my master's, and then I stayed on to do the PhD. My master's and PhD I have a minor in painting in both of those, which is kind of unusual for typically art education graduate study. And the greatest, there were so many wonderful people involved, but of significance for me and very precious was working with Richard Mayhew. And you may know Richard is African-American, Native American. He identifies as landscape painter, came out of the tail end of the Harlem Renaissance. And I had him as my painting prof during the end of my master's, beginning of my PhD. He kept trying to get me over to do an MFA, but I didn't do it. But anyway, one day he came up to me and he said, very quietly, he was a very gentle man, came and said, Jen, I think you're struggling a little bit here. Why don't you just ditch the Payne's gray that you have in your palette and try working with a limited palette, a few reds, some yellows, French ultramarine, some titanium white, and see what happens. And that's all he said. And I did that because in those days, remember I came out, undergraduate school was the 70s. Everything was hard-edged painting and tonal painting and, it was sort of Armani. I met Richard and it became Versace for me, right? It was color exploded. And more importantly, he understood too he kind of just with a whisper in my ear, and he said, just pay attention to the spirit of your surroundings. And I just looked at him, I didn't say anything, and I just kept working. But that advice and those words from 1984, Sergio, right? They have stayed with me ever since. Wow. And have continued to inform how I work and continue to work and continue to discover and to push my understanding of those things. Does that sort of get at?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's beautiful because it ties in, it works now both ways, right? In that, you had that experience of working with somebody who became a big influence in you in becoming the artist that you are now. And then you as an educator providing the same thing now, for another generation of artists who, you never know. And in my experience too, as an educator, something I have said maybe in a class somewhere that maybe I don't even remember now, but for that student, has made a huge difference. And I think that's the beauty of education, right?
No, I agree with you. And I don't know about you, but I'm sure that's happened to you. You'll have years later, students will say, oh, remember when you said that thing?
Yes.
It's oh, okay. If that worked for you, that's great.
Yeah. It sounds like something I would have said. Yeah. So
right. It sounds like me.
Absolutely. But that is awesome. That's beautiful. I think, be able to see it on both sides. So as you went through your, career as a professor. Also, tell me a little bit about, the nuances of, because there's a lot of also artists, professors who listen to this podcast, and one of the biggest struggles is time management, right? How do you manage being able to devote enough time for your students, for your career as an educator, and also for your art, how do you manage that, for someone like you with so much experience?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And it is an ongoing management, right? We're always doing that. We might have periods where it feels a little comfortable, but, as you said at the start of the podcast, life interrupts and changes and we have to adapt again. One of the greatest advantages I had to making the move to the University of New Brunswick here in Fredericton. And it was a faculty of education. That was a big leap for me. I was no longer in a fine arts faculty, no longer in an art education faculty, but in a general education faculty as an art ed prof. That was a big leap and change. But the best thing about the change and the move here is that there's something called the collective agreement. This is a university that is unionized. And in the collective agreement, that binding piece of policy that tells administration and faculties what it is they can and cannot do and what they're responsible for is, in the area of research and scholarly work, is the phrase creative work. And what that means, and what it meant for me, was that my visual work would be taken as seriously as anything that I've written or any conference that I attended or anything else. And now that doesn't necessarily mean that it was easy to do because you're still teaching undergraduate and graduate courses and you're supervising undergrads and you're supervising master's and PhD students and the rest of it. Mm-hmm. But it did mean that I could say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm in my studio. And that is a big deal because a lot of the art education colleagues, friends and colleagues that I have around the world, and particularly in the US, who started out as artists, even though their work took them into other theoretical fields, as mine did with teaching art history, they had to give up their studio practice because the universities just didn't support that kind of work. And in my career here, the expression, use it or lose it. Every time I made a painting, and there were times also when I blew glass or I did tile work or I did photography, but every time I made work and put it out there, I was making a political argument. Because every 3 years when the collective agreement came up for renegotiation, the first thing on the chopping block was the area of creative work. And so my colleagues in creative writing, they felt, there are poets at the university, there are singers and musicians and composers. And so it is that business. I felt very strongly to keep working, not just for myself, but because of how much I valued the people who put that clause in that place and to carry it forward. Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great because, how could we be creatives and teaching creativity without ourselves putting first on that spot of being creative?
No, it seems like a no-brainer, right? But but it's I'm 40 plus years in the field, and it's the same argument that has to be made over and over again. And that's probably a podcast for another time. So
that's right. Yeah, exactly. but that's great. So now, as of now, so you are now retired from teaching?
Yes, I retired actually 6 years ago.
Wow.
My the last piece of artwork I made at the university was, I like to call it a performance piece. I marched in the strike at the university and I retired.
That's awesome.
But
leave with a statement.
Exactly. So I actually wrote a cookbook, but that's another story. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time. Anyway, so 6 years ago, 2014 in July, I retired. And I was already in this studio for 7 years, where I'm talking to you from, that you can see in my video. So, and it meant, for the first time since I was 5 years old, the first time since kindergarten, that I got to be full-time as an artist. And of course, like everybody, I'm a wife, and I'm a mother, and I'm a grandmother, and I'm a sister, and I'm a friend, and I'm all those other things too.
Right.
But I get to do this full time, and it's just been explosive for me. It's just been fabulous. I'm so grateful.
That's awesome. I love that story, and I think it's a great transition into what we can talk about next, which is a little bit of the business of art, right? And because now you went from that transition, and as you enter into the new world of now I'm dedicating my pretty much my whole day to my art and the things that I'm doing in my art, and now this is my new focus. And how the world has changed too, right? And now we have social media and we had all those things. So tell me a little bit about your approach to kind of like that realization of now I have all this time. Now what did you decide to do first, or or what to prioritize in that sense, based on the world at that point?
Yeah, I would like to say that I had an organized plan, but I really don't live. I mean, I do plan, absolutely, but I'm also someone who just tries to pay attention and leaves herself open. And if I have hunches about things, I try to follow them, have the courage to follow them. So in 2014, as I just started working and out, and painting, and it was the first time I was able to actually let paintings sit. I didn't have to rush to get them out there in the world like I did at university because I had to publish, right? And I had to get into a group show, or had to get, to keep that obligation. I could sort of let them sit. So one of the first things that happened is I gave my work, I talked about my work at a conference in Sicily called Art and Psyche, Layers and Liminality. And what that let me do, and I didn't realize it till on reflection, is it actually made me confront what it is I actually believe about my practice and what it is I think it is I'm doing. And that was a huge step. And of course, it continues to get revised.
Refined,
that was a huge, huge step. What also happened was just before retiring, I had a kind of comprehensive solo show that, for the record, the university saw as a published book, which is kind of interesting the way to think about things. But anyway, that show traveled around the province and then into the States over the years, like between 2010 and 2014 when I retired. But in 2014, I showed for the first time in the States, since my leaving the States, in Massachusetts. So what I started to see was that I had options. I no longer had the constraints of the university ensuring that everything had to be juried, that they had to be, and that I could try other things. And so by 2017, 18, I did exactly that. I had exhibitions that were in traditional commercial galleries, in what we call a museum, and then I tried some things like Miami Art Week in 2018, and it was at that time preparing for that trip. We actually drove from Canada to Miami.
Wow.
We shipped. So I hope this is answering your question, Sergio.
Yeah, this is perfect.
So what I wanted to know, okay, so back up a few steps. What happened was in like 2016 or so, 2017, after the conference in Sicily, I had met a friend there from Pittsfield, Mass. And he said, I think your work would be great in Studio Visit magazine. It's a juried publication. You submit online and they have different jurors. And so I did that. And I said this in my talk, you remember that it like landed me into this like art world, cyberspace art world. I had no idea. Suddenly I was receiving emails. Oh, we saw your work in Studio Visit and, would you like to exhibit with us? And then it was largely about exhibiting in, pay to display kinds of situations, or in the more negative sense people refer to as vanity galleries, which, as you know, I don't like that term. In any case, I had an opportunity to visit a gallery in Fort Lauderdale that had invited me to do that. And I really liked the owner, who's a wonderful photographer, and I liked the people there. And Jerry and we thought it through. I talked to some of the artists who had shown with them, and we thought it through and said, okay, why not try it? Let's see what happens. And I wanted to see how my work up to that point sort of fared in some larger context. And this is going to segue us right into social media, particularly Instagram, where you can, in a moment, see work, from all over the world. And that was very exciting for me. Miami was a big deal. I'll probably not do it again. I mean, never say never, but I sort of went for it when I did it. And I don't think I could ever surpass the experience that I had there. So that was good. And do you want me to take a break here, or should I keep going?
No, well, I love where we're going. So I think it's perfect. And actually, that was around the time when we first met, also through social media, right? It was at the time you were ready for Miami, and I believe
Hamptons. It was Hamptons.
Oh, it was Hamptons.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the point. Exactly right. So it was my daughter, Megan, my stepdaughter, who said to me, Jen, she said, if you're going to do this and you're going to start, and it was my husband who actually incorporated the studio. He did all the paperwork to make the studio, Jennifer Pazienza Art Studio, a business. I didn't even ask him. I mean, he just went, which is great.
That's awesome.
I know. But it was Megan who said, you need an Instagram page. And I said, oh, come on, really? Like, she said, yep. I said, all right. I said, look, she's very tech savvy. I said, you do it. I'll give you access to my photos. We can talk about what, and so it began with her doing that in like 2017, 18. And then came Hamptons,
Mm-hmm.
and no, back up. I lost my place here a minute. No, I learned about you from Vicki Lentz, New
Oh, from
Brunswick
Vicky
artist
Lens.
Vicky, right? Who has,
Right,
yeah.
absolutely.
And
A Canadian artist as well. Yeah, of course.
yeah, wonderful, wonderful, and just
Mm-hmm.
a lovely human being. And so I looked into Art Next Level, and I thought, oh, I'm not really ready to commit. And you remember I emailed you, and you
I
said,
remember
sure,
that.
we can do a one-on-one. And we spoke for about an hour. We had a wonderful
Right.
Skype call.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was in the winter. And then fast forward to the summer. By this time, my daughter's pregnant. She said, Jen, you have to take over Instagram. I've got pregnancy brain.
Now it's your turn.
Okay. And I was ready for it. I was.
Yeah.
I was ready to, I still had so many technical things to learn, but I liked the idea of curating my page.
You're right.
And then you and I spoke again. Let's see, what was a year ago last summer, getting ready for Hamptons, and me wanting to run my first Instagram ad. And as you know, the advice you gave me was excellent. It was still making the transition from thinking like an academic and thinking partly like a business person in the finest sense of that.
Right.
Making the shift to self-representation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is wonderful. That's why I love your story, Jennifer, because again, the background that you have is very common. Many artists spend a lot of time in education or even doing something else. But then, as you approach then the business part, right, of it, which is like, wait a minute, no, I want to run it as a business and professionally as a business. Then the dynamics change, the way you speak about it too, the way you present it, the way you talk about it. And something that I love that you also see the way of working and managing your career, what we call the hybrid artist, right? It's like an artist where you can move in both worlds, right? The traditional way of working in the art world, with the gallery, with the museum, and in that sense, but also at the same time saying, well, there are many other opportunities, as you said earlier, in the world today that were not, here 15, 20 years ago, that I want to be part of. I want to also be, have an active presence. And it's not saying, well, the other one is outdated or is bad, or this one is better. It's actually kind of being able, like the hybrid idea of being able to move in both worlds with ease and with respect of each other's places in the world. And that gives us, I think, a lot more opportunities as artists, allows us to work more freely, as you mentioned. And because on both sides, there are beautiful people and amazing people who are there,
that's absolutely true.
Waiting to work with you. Mm-hmm.
That's true. And I have to acknowledge something though too, Sergio. Mm-hmm. I mean, I live a privileged life. I mean, I worked for the life that I have. I'm not denying that, Right. I've been working since I'm 16. When I retired was the first time I stopped. But I do have a privilege in that I have a pension, right? I mean, I do have an income. And so I want to make sure that that's clear to folks, that they understand that I understand that. And that I have, because of that, because I worked for that and it's in place, there's almost this sense of, one, I want to acknowledge it, but also there's like this obligation. You have this privilege, Jennifer. Now, what are you going to do with it? Kind of thing. And that's very real for me. And so trying different things is almost a way of saying, okay, you're someone who, I mean, there might be something to lose, but not necessarily, but with, all kinds of things to gain. Let's see what happens and let's see what you can do and what might it mean for you and for others. So,
right. And I think I love that you mentioned that, because that, as you said, you see it as a privilege, but it could be an obstacle for many other artists, in which, because now you have the comfort of it, right? Then you're like, well, why push myself to do something else? You could just have retired, be home, do the art you wanted, and just be it, right?
Well,
but you have chosen to, to move forward and to take steps in new ways, in new worlds, and digital media and all these things. Now you've been doing collaborations and videos, and I mean, I've been following you, and that you're not afraid to get up and and try things where otherwise you could have said, well, now it's time for me to retire, focus on myself, and just chill. But you're not chilling at all.
No, I suppose. And, and there are reasons for that, Sergio. There's probably just enough Roman Catholic guilt still hovering around there in my psyche that says, you know, you've built this incredible studio that you have. What are you going to do? Just let it sit there?
Yeah.
You know? And then there's the reality. I'm 66 years old. Well, I'm 20 years older than my mother was when she died. You know, I'm almost the same as my father. So it's not like I come into my studio and say, oh, you know, I have to pay homage to my parents. That's not it. But there is that sense of, man, you know, I have a life and I have a healthy life. Again, what are you going to do with it? And
exactly.
And I mean, and maybe it's okay too to just say, well, you know, I'm finished now with this. I'm just going to like chill and do, and maybe that would be okay too. But that's not where I am just yet. It will come, I assume. You know, it will. And it's inevitable. It will come if I continue to live and age in the world. It definitely will come. But somehow I've been blessed with this. You know, desire to make things, you know. Yeah,
that's awesome.
And make a life, you know, and make a world.
To make things and to make things happen, which are two very different things.
No, that's true. You know, that's true.
And one of the things that you did recently, which I love too, you did actually a workshop or a talk for local artists in your community. I think you call it the way of the hybrid artist or something of that nature, which I thought it was amazing. Can you share a little bit about that? And maybe what are some of the highlights, some of the feedback that you received from some of the artists? You know, that's a great story.
Sure. Well, it came about because some artists in the community were curious about what it is I've been up to. And part of the reason for that is that while I was at UMB and doing my thing, as I mentioned to you one time, we have the oldest craft college in the country, the Brunswick College of Craft and Design, with extraordinary fine artists and fine craftspeople, I mean, doing great things. And so artist groups and connections and collaborations have been in place with people, but I've been sort of like I don't want to say an outsider, but as a professor, I needed to work with everybody. So I never really aligned myself with any particular group or whatever, but always had really good relationships with folks. Right. And in these last 6 years since retiring, I have been trying different things, and people have been noticing that I have things on Facebook and things on Instagram, and of course, most recently, the Small Works Challenge with our group got their attention.
That's awesome.
And the fact that I was with a commercial gallery for 10 years here in Fredericton, a wonderful gallery, Ingrid Mueller Art and Concepts Gallery, and then left them at around the time that I retired, 2014-15, just to take a break and to see what was possible, as we already said. Yeah. And so at first we thought a bunch of us might just have some coffee and they'd ask me questions. And then one thing led to another. And I have very close working relationships with the Beaverbrook Art Gallery and the education and communications person there, Adam Mielescu. And we said, okay, well, let's bring it into the gallery and see what happens. And truthfully, I didn't advertise very far in advance, so it was short notice for a lot of folks. But that was sort of me being a little bit nervous about doing it and making it so public in the first place. But in that setting, I asked the question. The question of is it traditional petrol? Is it exclusive electric, or is it happy hybrid that fuels your art career? You know, what do you do? And I, although they had specific questions about actually the workings of Instagram, it was, as you know, it got situated into the broader conversation about how we want to live our lives as artists at whatever stage we are, you know, whether you're emerging or mid-career or somewhere in between or established and so forth. And so that's what I did. I told my story and answered the questions as best as I could about what I'm doing these days as a happy hybrid.
That is awesome. And I watched the whole video. It was super cool, super amazing. And I mean, I've said this before prior to the conversation. I love the way you started the whole presentation with a video that was made out of pretty much like a documentary, almost mini documentary of your studio, your work, life. And that was awesome. I think that's a nice, really piece of video that you know, can really continue to tell your story, right, as you move forward, which is wonderful.
Thanks for saying that. It was really important to make that video, one, as an archive, as you know, an archive for my kids and for the family, but also about Keswick Ridge. You know, When Jerry and I came to look at the house here on the ridge in 1993, we had been looking for a place outside the city for a while, and I walked in and I looked out the windows down the valley, and I didn't even want to look at Jerry because I loved it immediately, and I thought, the house sat empty for a year, no one wanted it. And I looked at him and I thought, and fortunately he felt exactly the same way. And this ridge has really taught me about being the painter that I am and continue to become. And I mean that very sincerely. So it was really important for me to also, as you say, document this part of the world.
Right.
This little place called Keswick Ridge.
Yeah. No, that's fabulous. And I love that it was like so peaceful, like, oh my goodness. I mean, it moved me there in a few seconds. I was hooked.
Well, it is. It's an extraordinary
for our friends who, of course, we are right now on audio only here in podcast.
Sure.
But for our friends who would love to see that video, is that on your website or on YouTube? Where can they?
Yes, it's YouTube. It's a YouTube video as well, but you can access it from my website. There's a link right on the homepage of my website.
Okay.
At jenniferpazienza.com. For people using Instagram, if you go to my Linktree links, it's there.
Awesome.
And you can just click on it and go there and see it. It's about 5 minutes. I should also acknowledge the music, may I do that?
Yes, of course, please.
The music for the video was written by my friend Kevin Slick, and of course the video by Aurora Productions here. I had I don't know what I was doing in 1999, and I missed the song by Maestro Fresh West, Canada's seminal rapper, Stick to Your Vision. But I heard it a few months before making the video, and I loved it. The lyrics, everything spoke to me, and it samples another Canadian artist. And I tried to get the rights to that song, and it was just so prohibitive. I couldn't afford to do it. And plus, they already had a great video for that song. So, so what I was talking to my friend Kevin about it, and he said, okay, list all the words that meant, and Kevin has known my work. We knew each other in Pennsylvania. He's in Colorado now, but we knew each other in Pennsylvania when he was doing DJ work for local radio. And he took what I told him and crafted that beautiful music and song for that for the video too.
And the end result is beautiful, and invite your friends to go check it out, because I think you will also be inspired by it, and I think that's awesome. And it's great to have, I talk about many times in some of my Breakfast with Sergio episodes and here in the podcast, the importance about documenting our art and our life as artists. I mean, yes, Instagram and all that is good, and those little mini 1 minute videos is good and fine, but those are like passing by, right? They're just like so fast. But having the opportunity to, work with people in really producing a video piece that's really better production value and everything, it's just an asset that as an artist then you can have, and that, it can tell your story in such a beautiful way.
Thank you. And it was really important for those youngsters, I call them youngsters in their 20s, Zach and Ken and those folks to make they had never done an artist video before.
Oh, so really? That's awesome.
Now they have it in their portfolio. I mean, they've used it to secure their work, and I mean, it's phenomenal. And you just reminded me of something, the business of documenting. I come by it honestly. When my parents were alive and my father was alive, he had one of those reel-to-reel tape recorders and was always using a Polaroid camera. And so, the idea of keeping track of one's life, I think, started for me, now that I think about it, like at a very early age.
That's awesome. So Jennifer, tell us also for, our friends who are listening to this conversation and they've been inspired by your words and your career as well. What is one of the biggest obstacles that you had to overcome when it comes to social media? And we all have different things, right? For some people it was like thinking about overthinking the post or doing videos or, how to do it right. What was kind of one of the things that you struggled with the most in social media? And then, now what is one of the things that you enjoy the most? So both kind of what was hard and what was the good part of it.
Right. Aside from overcoming some of the technical things, I think for me, it has to do with making what's private public, and the degree to which I'm willing to do that. Mm-hmm. Recently we were talking about creating posts where you tell something of your story, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And for me, there's a lot about my story that it's social media related, but it's bigger than that. Mm-hmm. I always question whether or not I should talk about certain aspects of my story, because I don't want to trade on them in terms of getting people to think about my work, although it's intimately related. I don't know if that makes any sense. I mean,
of course, yeah.
There are just some things, I don't want, because everybody has a life, and, right. And I could talk about domestic violence, and I could talk about abuse, and I can talk about those things that I sustained in my life. But what is that? Do I really want to do that in terms of what I say in an artist statement, or to your question, how much of that do I reveal in a public setting when I have no clue who in the world is going to be seeing or reading, and yet at the same time, to be in some way authentic with what we post. Am I answering the question? I mean, that's sort of where it is for me. Striking that balance where not everything is a rosy landscape lens, and so how to navigate those things in a way that's credible and honest. That's probably the hardest part for me, that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
And I think that's a really valid point, because actually this morning I was doing a live Q&A with our members in the academy, and that's one of the questions, right? We talk about the story, and I always talk about this in terms of, as you share your story, never share more than what you want a stranger to know. Because as you said, you never know who's going to read it. So, and it's okay. You are the storyteller, so you can pick and choose, what parts to share and what parts not to share, what parts are precious to you, what parts are, exactly. Your own, what parts. And when you talk about, for example, a struggle, you can just speak in general terms about struggle, because we all have struggles.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to necessarily explain the struggle itself. No. And sometimes you might need to protect other people and so on, right? But exactly. The struggle part, I think, when we share it, we become more human to the people on the other side. And that's a great point of connection. And we can do it in a subtle way, while protecting still our identity, still protecting who we are and so on. But yeah, it is a fine line. There is a fine line there. And sometimes it's tricky.
Yeah. And I think if I could just add to that for a moment, I think that sometimes, because the imagery I make oscillates between abstraction and representation, they can almost seem, some ways, easy, because I think sometimes people use a kind of stereotypical landscape lens. They need to shake those off and actually see. So for me, again, what I say has everything to do, I hope, with how people will look at the work. Will you please look closely, and just don't assume that, that's just a tree. There's a tree branch,
Right.
Can you look closely and see that, that it's a particular branch with a particular, conveying a particular thing. So
and it does help. I mean, last night I was doing some exercise and I was watching YouTube. I was watching the Tate Modern YouTube channel, and there was an artist where he was talking about his work, and it just made me look at his work in brand new eyes, just because I heard a little bit of his story and the things that he was going through when he made certain pieces in just a few words. It was just a very short video, like 5 minutes, but it just made me think, now I know a little bit more about the artist's story. Now I have a closer relationship to the work, just because I heard a little bit about it. And I think that's the whole purpose of the telling our story. Yeah. Now, and the second part of the question is what do you enjoy the most about social media?
Yeah. Well, okay. So many things. And it's so funny, because if any of my former students are listening to this, they're probably cracking up, because it was the longest time I didn't want to do any of this stuff. I love the possibility of connecting with people around the world. I love being able to see contemporary artists from all over the world, from all walks of life, at different stages in their careers. There's something so uplifting and sobering about knowing that my friend Jatin in Mumbai is, we were just talking it was 2:30 in the morning for him and 4 in the afternoon here, slugging it out in his studio, and I'm here, and there's the opportunity to just learn so much. And there's also, you and I've talked about this before, the business of relationships means everything to me. I mean, it should be obvious by now.
Yeah.
That relationships and relating in the world really matters. And one of the things about Instagram particularly is you can relate, and it goes back to what we were saying about private and public, you can relate to whatever degree you or the other person wishes, right? And so because of Instagram, I've had wonderful video chats with artists in Minnesota and Janet Dixon in South Africa. And, that's so wonderful to me because I don't have to hop on a plane. I could just do it. I was 9 years old when the World's Fair was in New York. And at that time, there's, someday there's going to be a phone where people can see each other. And my little girlfriends and I was like, oh my God, they're going to see us with our hair and rollers, and then we're going to see each other. And here I am, doing video chat. And it's come to pass, and it's very cool. And of course, it's the learning part and being able to, again, sort of get a sense of, what I'm doing against what other people are doing in the world. And not necessarily changing what I do, but rather reaffirming or questioning or,
Right. Yeah. And I think it's fabulous that we, got a chance to live through that transition, right? And to, we remember that you said, I grew up also a time before social media. My kids, they don't remember a time where you could not communicate with somebody or look at somebody in the screen from another part of the world. They just don't know that world. But we did, right? We lived on both sides, and we experienced that transition. And I think it's an amazing thing. I think as artists, it's definitely something that it's embraced, and I love how artists have embraced that and use that, as you said, to help each other out, to grow and to build communities, where you can have, an artist in an isolated rural area, but connected with thousands of people through an online community or through social media and whatnot. That's it's just an amazing thing. But Jennifer, we have, pretty much come to the end of our conversation, which, all good things have a good end too.
Yes, they do.
And you've been so awesome, Jennifer. You have shared so many great experiences, so also very inspiring conversations. Jennifer, where can our friends find you? Because I'm sure after this chat, a lot of our friends were like, oh, now I want to see Jennifer and I want to follow her on Instagram or see her work. And so can you share, please, your website, how you spell your name, your last name particularly, and your Instagram? Where can our friends find you?
Sure. So my website is www.jenniferpazienza, P as in Peter, AZIENZA, Z's for the Americans.
Yes.
.com, jenniferpazienza.com. And my Instagram is Jennifer Pazienza. So it's easy.
Easy breezy. So we expect our friends to go and find you to say hi. And if you follow Jennifer on Instagram, send her a quick note and tell her that you listened to this podcast episode. I think that would be pretty awesome. Jennifer, any last words before we close for the day?
No, just thank you. Thank you for your energy and all the work you do. I know I certainly appreciate it, and I know the world is better for it. So thank you very, very much, Sergio.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, as well. Thank you for being part of what we do here at the Artist Next Level, and also you're a great asset to our academy, and you're very supportive of other artists as well, and that's what we have in this conversation. I want to also commend you on everything that you're doing. Continue trying and testing and working and letting us know, how those things are working out for you. We love that. So thanks again, Jennifer. I want to thank to all the friends who listened to this podcast all the way to the end. You are champions. You're awesome. Please share this episode with a friend as well. And I will see you at the next level.
Check out our website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, where you will find our podcast library, learn about our upcoming webinars, find resources relevant to your career, and much more. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next level.